We're recording.
Okay. For our readers and listeners at the Libertarian Republic,
I lost your audio there, but I'll go ahead and start and say a little about something about me
yes.
to start out with. Hi, I'm Shannon Bray. I live in Apex, North Carolina, which is just outside Raleigh, with my wife and 3 children. We're a blended family. My wife and I are about to have an anniversary coming up on the 7th. So the nice thing is it'll be after the election cycle.
Yeah.
But
the anniversary early.
That's right. And I didn't forget about it either. So that's the important thing. Out of high school, I went to college fairly early, and I just wasn't ready for it. I went at 16. So as soon as I was old enough, I joined the Navy. Was a submariner, Navy diver, and really enjoyed my naval career. But I got out in 1997, started writing software professionally. I say that because I started as a kid with a Timex Sinclair 1000. Everyone have to Google that. It's a very old computer with tape drives. I'm old. So, so for the last 20 years, I've been focusing on, writing quality software, cybersecurity, and really trying to solve people's problems with software. Ever since for the last 10 years, my primary focus has been cybersecurity. So I've worked with the federal government, I've been to Afghanistan, I've been to Iraq, do implementations there for various agencies. And just recently I left DOD, primarily because of wasn't with the furloughing contracts and stuff like that. They became very unreliable for my family. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I decided to run in politics is last year we got furloughed. I was out of work for like 3 months while we were waiting for the government to decide whether it was going to get funded or not. And in that time, while I was furloughed, not getting paid, I decided that I wanted to go to Washington and try to figure out why these people couldn't make up their minds on in how to do things. Because it's always about, they always want our money, they're always taking our freedom, and then nobody's actually ever looking out for us, So after a while, I was starting to think that, hey, maybe a cybersecurity guy could go to Washington and make a difference. But then it really wasn't until Tom Tillis decided to funnel military money away from our bases in Camp Lejeune and our Coast Guard base, and Air Force base, and then Fort Bragg, just right down the street from me. Right, a lot of them were decimated with some of those hurricanes, and they needed money to repair their schools and their housing, their hospitals. And instead, that money was sent down to the border wall. Now, a lot of people in North Carolina were like, yeah, we want that border wall. But let's look back to see, there's only been 6 miles of new wall, right? That number that they're touting is wall repairs. And let's not forget that all of the presidents before that were repairing the wall. So North Carolina lost about $80 million to fund 6 miles of wall. And while a lot of North Carolinians might be okay with that, let's look at what Mitch McConnell did. He kept his money, right? He decided to spend his money for his military. And to me, I grew up Republican and was a member of the Republican Party all the way until like 2008. But for me, they were always the pro-military group. So, it upset me a little bit. As a Navy veteran, I was like, well, we should have kept that for our base. Fast forward, and then we have Cal Cunningham, right? And I don't really have to tell people about what he's done for the military. But granted, he's an 18-year service member. But, when him and I were sitting down talking at a debate, like just personally, I felt good about him on veteran services. So in the back of my mind, I was like, well, I don't expect to win as a libertarian. There's a very good chance you're going to win. at least I can stand by you on veteran services, right? I don't want you to raise my taxes. I don't want you to do all this other stuff, but at least I know my vets are going to be taken care of.
Right.
And then he goes off with the wife of a combat wounded veteran, and sleeps behind, and he's actually the one that reported it all. So once I found out that Cal Cunningham was a Jody, which is what we call a guy who stays behind to take care of your girlfriends when you're deployed.
Dad was in the Marine Corps and my brother's in the Army, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So you can ask them that, there's bro codes and then there's bro codes. And Cal Cunningham busted the bro code. And, I even sent him an email after, and like him and I have exchanged things before, but I pretty much called him a Jody, told him I was disappointed and that I was now going to start using this to gun after him. That's what I've done. Now, for me, the challenge is you don't really join this race as a libertarian and expect to win, right? As libertarians, we pull, 1 to 3% sometimes. So really our end game is trying to get the other two parties to start adopting personal liberties, right? To help us out.
Policy, yeah.
Yeah. So, if you look back at the ideologies of both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party back in the early 2000s, they were very closely aligned. But as the introduction of social media and all that happened, there's a huge gap, and now there's a divisiveness in there. But if you examine the policies of the Libertarian Party, we encompass both of those, right? There's the Republican ones that we hold very dear, the Second Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. But then there's some more liberal ones that we hold to, and we believe in freedom for all, and not just particular classes of people.
Right.
So with the libertarian movement, I really feel like A, I have a home. 2, we're helping to bridge the gap, and 3, every person I talk to, and I talk to them for a few minutes, they're like, hey, you know what? I think I'm a libertarian too. And I'm like, well, of course you are. That's why you and I are talking. You've got, because when you start with personal freedom, do you want the government in your house telling you what to do? The answer is always no. Nobody says no.
Well, I always tell people, I say, a lot of people are much more libertarian than what they think.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The problem is a lot of people just don't know what a libertarian is.
That's right. That's right.
A lot of people have never even heard of it. So unless they're, like a hardcore socialist, I don't think, a lot of people, both left and right, have much more libertarian tendencies than what they think they actually do. They just don't know what the word is. It's a funny word that they've never heard of.
Yeah, and the unfortunately, because you're 100% correct. Unfortunately, some people hear libertarian and it's like, oh, you're a libtard, right, or liberal. And I'm like, no, that's slang for the Democratic Party. It has nothing to do with us. I said, I'm more pro-second than your Republican senator. And they're like, oh, no way. And I'm like, well, let me tell you what happened. Tom Tillis, voted with the red flag laws and the bump stock laws and all of this. And Libertarian Party, any gun rule or any gun law is unconstitutional. It's not just the right to own a little pea shooter, right? It is the right to form a militia to defend our homes, right? And how are you going to do that with something you have to reload every 6 shots?
Right. I'm not even talking an AR-15. I want to be able to have a tank, and people.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, it's not ridiculous. It's really not. If you have the means to be able to own and maintain a tank, the way the framers designed it, they looked at it. Okay, back then everything was equal. How are we going to come at the government if we only have AR-15s and they've got tanks and planes?
Look, just for a side joke, I've looked at I've got a little one here signed by Spike. Oh man, the signature came off after shooting it. He's gonna have to sign that again. But then I've got like a 45 signed by Spike. Uh,
Oh,
and, then,
that's cool.
and then we got this one, also signed by Spike. So this is just what I got in my office.
Right.
But I'd say I'm pretty pro 2A.
But like what I was saying, you know, it's about equaling the playing field, and you have people that want to come after ARs and they don't even know what an AR is.
No. They're like, those are weapons of war. And I'm like, no. It would be if they didn't.
Nobody can ever use AR in combat.
It's the same as shooting a 22. You just got to keep pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's
it looks scary.
It looks scary, right? And it looks intimidating. But yes, they are as glorified pistols and long rifles, you know. So that's really all they are.
Well, to get on that subject, we were talking about how a lot of people don't know what a libertarian is.
Mm-hmm.
So to further expand on that, for somebody, when you're talking to somebody who doesn't know what a libertarian is, what would you say to them? What is the definition of a libertarian?
Yeah, so I say, well, let me simplify the Libertarian Party for you in just a few sentences. I said the thing that we strive for is our personal freedom. We start with personal freedom and then we work our way out. I don't want the government coming into my house telling me what to do. I don't want the government in your house telling you what to do. Therefore, you know, what you do inside, as long as you're not hurting nobody and as long as you're not committing fraud, you know, we don't care. So once we start there, everyone else is like, yeah, I don't want the government telling me what to do either. Then I'm like, all right, now let's step this out just a little bit. We can start with our First Amendment rights, right? Don't you believe in, you know, the right to assemble, free speech, the freedom of religion? Oh, of course. Well, do you not feel that you have the right to protect yourself? Yep. And I'm like, well, we can skip the third and fourth because we're not in war and we're not quartering soldiers in here, but we believe in the fifth too, right? And I can kind of go up each of the amendments up until we get, you know, the 16th Amendment is the one that allows the government to tax us. So I'm almost a constitutionalist, but I would like to take out the 16th and put a big old gap. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, and I tell people, you know, I'm a constitutionalist as the Constitution was originally designed before the 16th Amendment, before you have all these progressive amendments that were added to the Constitution. Study founding father history, you would know the idea of an income tax would be abhorrent to those guys.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so when I say, you know, you and I could probably agree on that. Libertarians are the original constitutionalists. I mean, unless they're a AMCAP, you know, if they're a minarchist, which is somewhere where I fall, you know, we are the original Constitution.
Yeah, I feel like we're the ones that loop back to our founding fathers, and that any other party is putting too many restrictions. I mean, even go as far as the Constitutionalist Party, which has got a cool name, yeah. But on their doctrine, when you look at Wikipedia and the doctrines that they have, you'll see that the Bible's listed. Now, I'm not against the Bible at all, but it shouldn't be listed in our government policies, right? Because we have the separation of church and state. And when I asked Kevin about that, who's the candidate for that, you know, because he said, oh, no, we're freedom of religion. And I'm like, well, it's kind of hard to be freedom of religion when you have the Bible in there, because there's plenty of religions that don't look at the Bible as their religious text. Right. So I feel like you're very exclusive. But he's like, well, just consider us the right-wing conservative side. So that kind of helped me, you know, picture them. And I was like, wow, but I really love the name constitutionalist because, you know, I feel like, you know, the libertarians, for the most part, they're the well-versed in it. They're ready to defend it. Right. And you never really have to explain our rights to a libertarian. So. No.
As a matter of fact, most of the time it's the other way around. When we're not infighting, we're trying to figure out and explain to other people, you know.
Right. Yeah. And that's the one thing I wish we didn't do so much is, oh, you're not libertarian. Well, you're not libertarian either. And I've been hearing that my whole libertarian, until I started running for Senate. Now people are like, oh, you're a great libertarian. I'm like, I'm the same libertarian you didn't like 2 years ago. My policies are the same. Because most of them, I say 75 to 95 align with the party perfectly. And then there's a couple that, kind of get mucky. I do try to come from a place of zero hypocrisy, which is almost damn near impossible. Because I can chase someone all the way down to a Hippocratic or a hypocrite moment if we dig deep enough. Most of it comes down to like when you start crossing in immigration and abortion. And when the baby actually becomes a citizen, you find that somewhere you trip people up. So it took me a while to really kind of think through where I stand. Where I stand personally is easy, but where I stand on policy, that's different. Because there's a number of things that I personally believe and I personally want to do. And then there's things that publicly I know that I have to do different. Let's say, because people hear that, they're going to want to know which one. So let's take vaccines for instance, right? I am two of my kids, which the girls that I brought into this relationship, they've been vaccinated, on schedule every time. But my wife brought the son into the mix, and he's on the autistic spectrum, right? And she believes that it happened with it's a vaccine injury. So, and my wife's not a dummy, right? So, and I love her. So you want to listen to what she's saying, right? And make sense of it. So, then I started once I started running, and then I started getting all these stories on vaccine injuries and whatnot. I was like, you know what, this is an easy choice. I personally choose to vaccinate my kids, but I definitely support your right to choose what's best for you and your family. And I don't think politicians have the right to tell you any other difference. So that is an example of, something that I believe, but something that as a policy, I'm not going to step on someone's personal rights. I am not going to use what I think to impose on someone else's. And then, a lot of times when you talk to people, they'll use the words, well, I think this and I think that. Well, and I'm like, well, your thinking doesn't apply to the Constitution. In fact, your fears don't trump my liberty, right? They never will. So don't try to intimidate me into voting for your candidate. It's not my fault you can't get a good candidate, right? And it's not my fault that I'm damaging your candidate. If I'm peeling away votes and your candidate can't get voted in because of that, pick a better candidate or change your platform or start thinking about personal liberty and start caring about us as people, because the duopoly, they don't care. As soon as they get to Washington, all they care about is getting reelected. And I made it an opening statement, and I'll always stand by it. If I get elected, I'll do 1-2 terms, and then I'm done. I want to go back to cybersecurity. And if I only do 1 term, I'm happy. I'll then be able to look at my kids and say, hey, you know what? Your dad did everything he could. And even if I don't get elected, my kids are super proud. In fact, tell you a quick story. My daughter was watching TV last week, and so she saw the commercial about Tom Tillis, right? And then right after, it's a commercial about Cal Cunningham, right? And then she comes running in, busting the doors, because I told her, Daddy's not going to win, but we're here to make a difference, right? Like, Daddy, you're going to win. Right. I'm like, baby, why are you saying that? She's like, well, I just saw the commercial, and Tom Tillis isn't a good guy, and neither is Cal Cunningham, and you're a good guy. So people are going to vote for you. And I'm like, sweetie, that is exactly the way it should be, but that's not the way it is. Said nobody's really even going to know that I'm running until they get to the ballot, and then they're probably going to gloss right over my name. So sometimes you have to get out there and make some noise. run a couple times, get people to believe in you, and then we can go for the win. And she said, well, I still think you're going to win. And then she ran off. But
the pure, sweet innocence of a
that's
child.
right. That's right. So, you know, she's pretty happy. She has some people at school now who their parents now know who I am. I think mail-in voting has really kind of helped the libertarians. It's hard to know without numbers, but because now I think people have the ballot at home next to their computer, and now they can start typing in. Because I've gotten a lot of email from people. Hey, I'm in the middle of filling out my ballot. I would love for you to, you know, answer a few of my questions. Now I'm a little different than Kyle and Tom, right? I'll be like, hey, I can answer it in an email, or I can give you a call. You know, whatever you want to do.
Right.
And I'll jump on a call, I'll talk to them, and I'm like, ask me anything. And look, I'm not gonna. I'll shoot the breeze, but and I'm gonna be as transparent as possible. And the thing that does catch people off guard is my public stance versus my personal stance. Right. You know, when it comes to some of those topics, but you know, I think people appreciate that I'm active with them on social media, and B, that, you know, I'm willing to jump on a phone call, you know, and answer some of their questions.
Well, let's expand on one of those controversial topics.
Okay.
Just because it's something that has always bothered me, in particular with the life issue and the abortion issue.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people, when you talk to them about libertarians, they think that all libertarians are pro-choice, and
right.
That's not necessarily the case.
No.
The people that initially drew me to the Libertarian Party were not. Ron Paul was not. Austin Peterson, who's now registered as a Republican, he's not. So there are plenty of pro-life libertarians. But I think what happens, in my view, is that there's just a absence of messaging, or maybe they're going about it the wrong way, to where the average conservative.
Your audio cut out. Wait 1 second. Let me see if it picks back in. Because I think what you're saying is important. Yeah, there you go. Go ahead.
Okay. What I was saying is, I think what the problem is with the messaging with the conservative, because I come from a very personally conservative background.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you said, you know, being registered Republican for the majority of your voting life. I was never registered Republican. I've always been unaffiliated but I've always had very conservative personal views because of my family and the way I was raised.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think the problem with libertarians when it comes to talking to the conservatives is if they do know who we are or know anything about us, they tend to think we're all pro-choice. What do you think the Libertarian Party could improve on that?
Okay, so and the abortion one of my favorite. If that's where you draw the line far enough, you'll find where somebody hits the hypocrisy level. So I can explain both sides of. And what people don't know is that our internal fighting a lot of time is on abortion, right? Because we have because of two reasons, right? We have the freedom of choice, which is where most people hear it, but then we also have the do no harm, right? So it really matters on where that line is drawn in the sand on when life begins versus when not. So personally, I'm personally against abortion.
Right.
But this is one of those stances to where publicly I take an alternate stance. But here's what I would like to see on the abortion front. I'm personally against it. I would like to see, you know, the organizations like, you know, I'd like to see like healthcare, you know, pay for the IUDs. I know that's not a libertarian thing, but let me explain that here in a minute. Like IUDs, the birth control and stuff like that. Because if I would rather that happen, funding, not getting pregnant to begin with, than have to fight for that life later. Because there's a lot of complications that happen on the abortion front, right? Where there are some that the abortion service is absolutely critical for the mother's life. I'm not a doctor. I am not capable of making that decision, nor will my policy that I would dictate encompass all of the things that get muddy around there. So with the Libertarian Party, it's simple, right? We don't like federal government telling us what to do. So our stance is simple. We don't want the Libertarian Party involved in that at all. Therefore, from the federal level, we become pro-choice because we don't want government interference. Because the alternative is having federal regulation dictate when life conceives, or whether it's at conception, a heartbeat, or whatever. Everyone's asking for some law, but that law won't help the people who were fighting for abortion. They'll keep trying to back it down into conception, and you know what? That just doesn't make any sense. Going all the way back into conception. Personally, for me, the heartbeat. I'm kind of careful what I was trying to say, but it's too late now. The heartbeat law made sense to me personally, but at the same time, the federal government has no right to come in and tell you, what's best for you when you have you and your doctor there.
Well, and on the flip side of that, I did an interview with pro-life advocate Abby Johnson, and we were talking about how all libertarians, regardless of where they line up on the life issue, they should all be against federal money going to Planned Parenthood.
Yes. Yeah, and that is across the board. Federal money to support abortion is something that we don't want federal money paying for anything that's not in the Constitution.
Right, and that has always been my gripe with it. Is okay, regardless of where you line up on that issue, why would you want federal money to keep going to? Why is the Planned Parenthood issue any different than?
Now, let me, and you please have the readers and stuff. I want you guys to Google this yourself. But as it stands right now, Planned Parenthood does not receive federal dollars for abortion. They do receive federal dollars for other services, but it is illegal for them to use federal money for abortion. So I don't want people to think that that's currently happening, because it's not. Now, I don't know when that law is in place, but as I was doing research, I saw that.
What Abby Johnson told me is that they've got their hand in so many other pots that they're getting it from other places.
And I definitely can't argue that. I don't know.
Yeah. Because I have heard that myself, because it's like, well, how do you claim to defund Planned Parenthood, which is something that I would want to happen anyway, regardless of where you line up on that issue, because I don't want the government funding things that aren't in the Constitution. And a few things that are in the Constitution, like the Postal Service, for example, I think we can do away with that.
Yeah, I had a run-in. So this morning I had this postman call me this morning. And I didn't know why. I learned why later. But he's like, Mr. Bray, I got a stack of mail here for you. And the print's too small. So I decided to call you and to tell you about it. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry the print's small. But I'll be sure to let them know. And he hung up. But then it was like a half hour later, I started getting all these other phone calls, and it was like, Mr. Bray, I just got your flyer, and I found out that Tom Tillis is against the Second Amendment. And I was like, what? What flyer are you talking about? And then I found out today that there's been a number of flyers go out. I know of at least 2 different kinds, but my phone's been blowing off the hook. But one of them I can proudly stand behind, which is on the Second Amendment. People are like, I didn't know that Tom Tillis, voted for the red flag laws. And I'm like, yeah, to be honest with you, Trump's done more damage to the Second Amendment than Obama did. So, with the bump stock and the Pro 2A, and I wrote the NRA, and look, I'm not a member. I don't want to be a member. You keep giving these Republicans who are pushing gun laws an A. And that's not what the Constitution is. So you need to support the Constitution and stop letting all of these other gun laws pass. And then they sent me back something, trying to encourage me to vote Republican. So I'm like, you're obviously not listening to me. I said, I'm the NRA's wet dream, right? Because any gun law is unconstitutional.
Well, let's get on to the next question. And what do you think sets you apart from Senator Tillis and Cunningham?
Well, being a veteran puts Cal and I apart, but then how I care about the veterans, with veteran services and stuff, I feel like that puts me well above, Cunningham, especially with his infidelity issues. But also, I'm the only cybersecurity guy on the ticket, and we have people complaining about election fraud. We got Iran, Russia, China in our elections, right? We've got cyber attacks happening on the federal government and small mom and pop shops. Where people are constantly being threatened with ransomware. And when you have Zuckerberg go in front of Congress and talk to them with information technology words, you got Congress like, they have no idea what he's even talking about. And then their questions reflect that. So, anybody in the industry is like, man, look, this guy's schooling these people. And everybody else is like, oh, he's, so it's a lack. We are well beyond just fighting about, some of these other petty things that happen on the various platforms. We've got to start getting engaged with how do we protect our citizens digitally? Because World War III, is going to be a digital war. It already is. Coronavirus hit, right? Now we're under attack by various governments and hackers hitting the hospitals just in the last couple of days. So bad that they couldn't even intake patients because they're only on paper. The computer systems are down. So, and Tillis and Cunningham, their best bet's to call me. So if they have to call me, might as well just put me in.
kind of getting on the social media issue. That's something I think you have a bit of expertise. Maybe you can speak to something about it, being a cybersecurity guy. Okay, with Facebook and Twitter and all these platforms, we've seen recently that they want to take down a lot of posts that they disagree with, and a lot of different people across the political spectrum. But I saw recently, thanks to our mutual friend Shane Hazel, they really want to go hard after us libertarians. And I tell people all the time that you see conservatives that want to regulate social media, and that's just going to make the problem worse.
Yes.
So if you were elected as a senator, how would you address those issues? What would you like to see done?
So, well, the first thing is to remember that, if I go to the neighbor's house and I pee in their yard, they have the right to get upset, right?
Right.
We use Facebook, we use Twitter and all of these things. They're free services for us. And they're free because they are able to data mine our data and then sell it. But then they also have to worry about getting sued because of stuff people said. So, a lot of their stuff is coming from defensive measures of, because they get blamed for everything. Now, it would be nice to have a channel to have freedom of speech. I'm a very vocal on what people can do and not do, but people do get very, and I can attest to this, people do get damn right nasty, on social media. So while I'm against the moderation of it, but people do have to realize there are kids involved, and those industries are just trying to protect themselves. But it doesn't stop me from going out and creating my own blog, which I'm actually going to do after this election, and then really just kind of then nobody can take that down, right? That's my freedom of speech. The problem is it's like you're basically walking into someone else's home, jumping on their desk and preaching. While I would like to very much, it's kind of weird because they do get sued quite a bit for that stuff. So it's more of a defensive thing. I don't believe I think the rules should be straight across the board. I have seen more of the conservative and the libertarian views get their accounts blocked.
Yes.
A lot quicker than a democratic one. So the rules should be applied equally across the board. Whatever your rules are, apply them to everyone. And then I have no problems with it, right? But if it looks like just us as libertarians or just conservatives when we bring in the Republican Party, if it's just us, damn right we should be mad about that. Because as long as we're treated equally across the board and we know what the rules are, it makes it easier. But people are getting blocked for, saw someone on Twitter the other night get blocked for something they tweeted against Hunter Biden, and the statement wasn't unfactual, but he got blocked for like 12 hours. And then Twitter say, "Oh, this isn't true," but then later it was breaking news, right? So I don't really know how that gets handled, but they overcorrect. Now, to be honest with you, there's no person doing this. It's all done with artificial intelligence, a system's doing it, but there are rules that are used to do those that they're able to identify various people and block them. So I do think that there's some bias against conservative speech.
Right. Yeah,
I think you're.
Say that for sure.
Say that again. Your camera froze. I can tell because your fan stopped.
Yeah, I knew that for a fact. I could speak to that personally about how things are blacklisted, and I wrote an article about how the Libertarian Republic, along with Glenn Beck and several other much bigger names than we are, Rush Limbaugh, we were on a blacklist for one of their apps. And I got a tip about it and wrote an article about how that the TLR was blacklisted.
Oh, wow. That'd be cool.
So, I thought, that was kind of a sense of pride for me in one way. It's like, hey, we're doing something that got the big boys scared,
Well, that's kind of how I started thinking about those flyers that were coming out today. I was like, wow. For someone to actually go in and put flyers to, start funneling votes off of Tillis, that tells me that they're scared, right? And so it's, at one point you're like, there's a badge of honor there, but then the other point you're like, hey, just let me do my thing,
Yeah.
So.
So I kind of play both sides of the fence because I had all the emotions coming at me at one time. It's kind of like, hey, but no, I don't.
Yeah.
I was pissed, because it's like, why would they censor us?
Right.
Are they scared of us?
Yeah, and a lot of the blocks that I've seen on
I definitely know what you're talking about.
Oh, lost your audio. Yep, there you go, right there.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
What are the biggest issues that you think North Carolina is facing, and how do you think that you can help solve those?
Well, we have a few things, right? We still need to get our bases fixed. We need to help communities get broadband service, especially now with the coronavirus and a lot of students still learning remotely. I feel like some of our schools may actually close again with the various outbreaks that are happening. Kids are just now going back to school and now they're starting to shut them down again with COVID. It's really important to get internet access out to the rural communities. So I feel like something in somebody in information technology who actually understands how all those technologies work would be largely beneficial. I think our economy definitely needs a boost, especially here in North Carolina. Some of the things that, and we're in a technology hub, and we're constantly bringing in jobs there. But then I'd also like to see the legalization of marijuana, right, to where we can grow it as a cash crop. Yeah, because we've got rural North Carolina out there. They can grow CBD, but some of their other crops, you know, they're failing. They need federal subsidies, and we need them, right? I mean, these people are growing our food. They're not making enough money. You know, being able to add a cash crop like marijuana, I think, would be extremely beneficial. And to decriminalize it all the way across the board just makes sense, because there's so many people in jail for nonviolent drug crimes, and we're paying way more money to keep them in than they would require on the outside. So, you know, that's another thing that I feel like we could probably help do with North Carolina.
Okay, just to put that one little bit of that issue there. From a libertarian perspective, you mentioned something about subsidies. How would you reconcile the subsidies with the libertarian point of view?
Well, you know, we can't just get in right away and then go taxation is theft and stop all of our spending. So here's one of the things that I would like to actually do is implement a system to where, hey, you know, once a year, you fill out this form and it's got everything that we spend our tax dollars on, right? And then you go through and you check where you would like to have your tax dollars go. And if a program doesn't get a check by everyone in North Carolina enough to fund it, then it should be shut down. And this should happen because, you know, we're not necessarily opposed, or at least I'm not necessarily opposed to having federal spending, but I'm opposed to spending trillions of dollars overseas when it could be used home. I'm opposed to, you know, us voluntarily paying for one program and then that program dies and they don't stop taxing us for it. They take our money and they just go apply it to something else that we didn't even select. You know, there's a lot of things that us as libertarians would say, hey, you know what, I don't mind paying my money here, but I don't want to pay it there. And so I think that we should have that right to say where our money goes, defund those programs, and then only be taxed what we need to fund the programs that we're trying to do. Because we can't just walk in and be like, you know, taxation is theft, which is, I can tell you a story about the IRS that boils my blood from just this week alone. But, you know, we do want to make sure that we pay for our defense, you know, our defense, not some third party war out there that's run by politicians, right? We don't want to weaken our defense structures. You know, and, you know, there's plenty of programs that I think libertarians would actually support, but there's way more that we have that we're like, no, we don't want any part of that, you know. And, you know, and a lot of them include we don't want to federally fund abortion. We don't want to federally fund war. We don't want to federally fund the Republican and Democratic parties, right? They get our tax dollars to run their campaigns, and the Libertarian Party doesn't get any. You think I want my money going off to fund them when they don't even fight for my policies? So yeah, that's the way and it's very similar to how I think we should elect our president too, you know, like with, I've seen some examples that really kind of got me thinking to where you pick your number one choice, but then you pick your second, third, and fourth choice, right? And everybody does that. And then they aggregate that data together, and then you get your president, and then you get your vice president based off of, you know, those particular votes. And then I think we kind of lose that partisan bickering, right? Then you're voting for your principles, you're voting for your guy. But if your guy doesn't come in first, you know what? Maybe he's going to come in second, and he can still help shape American politics, so that you don't get screwed with a tandem that you really hate, which may happen. Well, it's going to happen to half the callers, no matter who gets elected, right? They're going to get that tandem they really hate, and then the next 4 to 8 years, all we get to do is complain about it. Where if we had one guy for you and the vice presidents for them or vice versa, things would be a little easier. In fact, the first person that I know of who tried to do that was McCain. He actually wanted to pick Pat Buchanan, who was a Democrat, to be his vice president, but the GOP had a fit. And then they ended up with Sarah Palin. And Sarah Palin is one of the reasons why I became a libertarian. So I couldn't support that.
That they used to, back in the founding era, whoever got the most votes was president, and the second most was vice president, regardless of party. So
and that to me would break the divisiveness of, because we're basically a country with two football teams, and it's almost like the real world, right? You have the Cowboys and the Patriots. And there you go. Everybody else is just the third parties, right? Now they might change, and now might be the Bucks since Brady's over there, but it'll still be the damn Patriots, right? So if you're not one of them, you don't count. But yeah, unfortunately, American politics has become a very divisive, bickering sports match, and I think the libertarians can really help there.
Well, let me ask you about our little tyrant in Raleigh, Roy Cooper. How do you feel about how he's handled the whole COVID thing with the shutdowns, and we see the effects on the economy and people's mental health and all these sorts of things that are really affecting negatively? It's always the unintended consequences of bad policy, that hurt people the most. So what do you think about that?
Well, I don't think that he did it maliciously, but I also don't like, I'm smart enough to make my own choices, kind of like going back to the vaccines and whatnot. So I don't appreciate the curfews. I don't appreciate you shutting down businesses. To me, it should have been a voluntary thing. Hey, if you shut the businesses down, maybe then we'll help you out financially. But if you want to remain open, but it not be more than you would have made by staying open, right? If your customers want to come in, let that be their personal choice. If your kids, now schools are a little different because I do feel for the teachers. So that to me is iffy. I just don't appreciate laws telling me what I can and can't do. And that's me personally. I wear a mask when I go out. I try to be respectful of others, but there's times when I don't wear a mask, and I want that to be okay too. I don't want the police coming and being like, "Oh, you're under arrest for not wearing your mask," because then I'll be like, "Come and get it." Right? That you're not going to impose your will on me, and that's my problem with the whole thing.
And that has been my problem personally from the very start. I mean, I went to one of the rallies in Raleigh protesting the reopening city. My issue has never been wearing a mask, or even though I personally don't. My issue is not with the people that want to wear a mask and do all the social distancing and all those things. If they want to do that, fine. But don't mandate that everybody has to do one thing in this one size fits all policy.
Right.
And where government comes off like they're some sort of god, and they can tell everybody what to do and how to do it and where to do it. It's ridiculous. I mean,
that's when we know we've given them too much power, right? And it's time to take it back.
I mean, exactly. I mean, when you have federal officials and health officials saying that you have to wear a mask when you have sex and all kinds of ridiculous.
Oh my God, I haven't heard that.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There again, they're coming into your home, right? Whether you want them there or not.
And it's ridiculous. All kinds of things that I never would have thought that I would have ever heard during this. I believe it's brought out the madness in a lot of people. I think you see good, but then you also see some of the bad. It brings out whatever is really and truly in somebody's heart. I do think that's something that is really exposed. But do you think So you don't think that he did it maliciously? Do you think?
No, I don't think that he did it maliciously. You know, I don't know that. I'm kind of putting just faith in him because I'm looking back at a lot of the stuff that he's done, and he doesn't seem to be that kind of guy. Right? You may not like his policies or anything, but he doesn't come off as to me, he doesn't come off as a tyrant, even though I don't like the lockdown stuff. That's getting more into the, you know, like,
tyrannical territory.
yeah. So, you know, that's where I'm kind of hoping, but then again, you know, I have a good friend, Steve, who I love dearly, and he's running for governor, and, you know, God willing, you know, I know Steve will do the right job. So,
well, it is my hope that we can further liberty and advance liberty in this state as well as around the country, and that's kind of why I wanted to give you a voice and at least give you a little bit of media attention and let the
I
voters
appreciate it.
But I appreciate you sitting down with me.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? If I'm not successful this race, I'm going to go 2022 against Burr. And this time I'm going to be going to make the debates. I'm starting fundraising now because, you know, I only raised a little over $400 for this. Well, that I spent myself. And I got a couple, but I'm going to have a full funded, I'm going to, you know, bring in $100,000 to make the debate stage. And I'm going to bring it to them this time. People are starting to pay attention to the Libertarian. All righty. Thanks for having me. And
hopefully then.
Yeah, hopefully we talk again soon.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you do another run, we'll have to see about getting another interview.
Yeah, okay. I'm looking forward to it. I'll talk to you later.